outside rectorado, so hopefully things will change. Um, I've been thinking, and we decided to reschedule the presentations so that everyone has the opportunity to do it in person. Okay. So today we are going to work with learning strategies that I told you that I was going to leave a recorded class. And we are going to talk about research, okay, in our field. So that's going to be the plan for today. And next Friday will be exams, so we won't have classes. The following Friday will be um, the week of cultural activities, and apart from that, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday will be FAPI. I don't know if you heard about FAPI. Yes? Um, I think that Sarah and Irma talked to you, probably. Yes? This is going to be a huge event. It's the most important meeting, gathering of English teachers in our country because it's the one that belongs to the Federation, okay, of English teachers. And there are going to be something like 400 teachers coming to our faculty because this time Tucumán is the organizer. And I think that Sarah or Irma told you or asked you if you would like to participate as collaborators. I don't know if she asked that. Yes? Who said yes already? Some of us will be there. Okay, great. I don't know if anyone else is going to join. Okay, it's going to be a good opportunity for you to meet people, okay, to get in touch with English teachers and researchers of our country. Um, I don't know if you participated in other meetings as collaborators. In general, of course, it's not paid, but it's the possibility of being in touch, of participating, of FAP in this case for free, because even if you will be doing administrative tasks, if you get organized, it's not something you would have to do all the time. So you get turns and you plan, and for example, you will be I don't know, taking registration or attendance at a certain time, but then you can also participate in the meeting and listen to the conference. Okay, so if anyone else is interested, you could let me know, and I will redirect you to Sarah and Irma, and well, of course, tell them that there are more people interested. Okay. I think that Sophie here says that some of you will be there as collaborators. Great. Anybody else? You will get, I think that you will get a certificate, okay, which is also something to begin with your CV, okay, and it's it's something that we typically add in the section of gestión or extensión, okay, in our CV, that we participated organizing activities, and that is also something that to be considered, okay, for example, for concursos and things like that, okay. So aviso parroquiales done. I don't know if anyone else is joining. We should be waiting for someone. There are not many people yet. We'll start with research, okay, because that's more or less where we left last class. And the second half of the class will be working with learning strategies, okay. So there. I had to wait a little bit more. Okay. So let's see. You cannot see there, right? But the small part. Okay, good, 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 good. I'm going to do it like that. It's a different account. So while I present, I won't be able to see you. So if you have any questions or anything, just stop me and I will come back and forth. Okay. So, um, well, what I intend to do with this short presentation is to give an overview of what we do in research in the area of SLA. You know that from the beginning of the year, we've been talking about SLA as being part of applied linguistics. So we do research in linguistics, okay? And there are some key concepts that we might need to clarify before we plan our project. One of the concepts is has to do with the different types of studies. This study there, I will have to stop to go back and admit people. These type of studies are cross-sectional or longitudinal, okay? Um, Within cross-sectional studies, we take a sort of picture, let's say a photograph of what happens at a certain time. We collect information at one point in time. So there is one instance of data collection, okay? That is generally what we do in our subject because when we do that, wait a second, I'm going to download it as PDF and yes. Good afternoon, Belen. I haven't taken attendance yet, so don't worry. There. I'll be more comfortable being able to see. Good. Can you see there? Yes.
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 Okay. So um, we have been talking about the types of studies, longitudinal and cross-sectional, right? Cross-sectional is what we typically do in the subject because we cannot take so many samples, okay, in this second term of the year. But they are all the same studies that can contribute with significant information to see at least what's going on at a certain point in time. Longitudinal studies imply collecting information over a period of time. That means taking samples at different moments. Okay, for example, if we analyze the interlanguage of a group of learners, we may interview them several times over a year. We may collect different types of samples, written and oral. Okay, we may follow them over a longer period of time, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. But of course, that's something we cannot do in our studies in the subject, okay? Because we have only a year of content and we do not have so much time to get to know the topics and the contents of the subject and at the same time develop a research project. But this is something that is usually done for master's degrees or PhDs, okay? And especially when you work as a group, as a research group, and everyone contributes with data of different kinds of informants, okay? So the first key concepts will be the type of study in terms of the number of instances of data collection and the amount of time you follow your informants, okay? Cross-sectional studies are usually, all of the studies, but especially cross-sectional, are usually enriched by collecting different types of data, okay? So, for example, last year, we worked, I think that I told you, we analyzed a group of students from French, from the French university course, and from communication sciences, because we were interested in observing their if there were any differences in multilingual learners. Okay, so we interviewed them in Spanish, we collected demographic data, we asked them to perform certain tasks, and then we also interviewed the teachers and we observed the materials that they used. So, like that, we had a group of different types of data that we had collected to analyze those particular informants and those two different circumstances. That was a cross-sectional study, but with different types of data. Cross-sectional and longitudinal, clear the concepts, right? Now, we may also talk about different studies in terms of how we plan them and what we expect with those studies. An exploratory study is a kind of study in which we do not really know what to expect. So our intention is to explore the conditions, explore the circumstances, explore the way in which people learn, for example, in which people acquire language. So that kind of exploration may not have a clear hypothesis, but more questions, okay? Research questions. We may also have the intention of describing, but of course, when we describe a context, a situation, an institution, a particular case, we describe and try to explain certain things, okay? And then we may plan a study as an experiment. And in that case, we will have an experimental study. That's not something we typically do, but there are studies in psycholinguistics that have been planned as such. An experiment is typical of the hard sciences. So you can imagine a laboratory and changing the conditions of certain variables to see how matter, how a particular solution reacts. So imagine that, okay? That's not something we might do with learners, with people. It's not so common to experiment with people. But we could plan, and I will give you some examples of experimental studies in psycholinguistics. There are studies, for example, that try to analyze how difficult it is to process certain type of information. So, have you ever been to the eye doctor, the optician, and you were asked to click on something while you watch it, while you saw a light? I don't know if you've ever been asked to do that study of campo visual. No? No? Okay. Well, it's something like that. There is a machine or there is a computer, for example, and you are asked to read a sentence or a line or a certain word, and you have to click on a button to see how fast you reacted to that interpretation. For example, if the word is ambiguous or not. So, depending on how fast you clicked on the button, they say how difficult, or they interpret how difficult it is for you to interpret something. Okay? So that could be an experimental study. To click on something, to decide on whether something is true or false. To sometimes they observe how fast your eyes move, and they try to interpret the period of time it took you to analyze or understand something. So there are those kind of studies that have to do with understanding, with reception of information, with perception. But in general, well, we do not have so many experimental studies in the field. Now, that as regards the type of studies, okay? So, going on. When we organize these studies, we try to observe what we would be doing, for example. The studies could be organized in terms of how structured the methodology of the study is, more structured to less structured, and how controlled the variables could be, or from less controlled to more controlled, okay? The more structured and the more controlled the variables, we are going to be facing experiments. So we, for example, choose our informants, we control the amount of time they spend doing something, we ask them to click on something, we ask them to choose, okay, and we design the experiment. When we interview people or when we ask our learners to do something, we will be in the box below that is asking and doing. So what does this mean? I'm going to plan all the steps in the study, but probably I'm going to be open to what the data will bring. So, for example, I will ask certain questions and I will plan an interview. I will think about the questions that I want to ask. I will plan the task. I will choose a picture. I will choose a task for them. But the information I will get will not be so controlled and so structured. Okay? Then, action research. What do we mean by action research? I don't know if you did the subject, the elective subject last year, but there was a subject of investigación educativa, and well, they were talking about action research there. What is action research? It involves, for instance, putting a new methodology to the test. So you have two groups of students or a particular group of students, and you choose to test them before introducing a new topic or introducing a new methodology of teaching. Then you spend some time with that methodology, and then you test them afterwards. And you see the effects of the actions that you performed, okay? So this is best done, for example, when we have different comisiones. And with one group, we teach the topic as we usually do it, but with the other group, we change the methodology. The groups of informants are comparable, okay? So because they are from the same subject, more or less same age, and the variable that we changed was the way of approaching a topic or of teaching a topic, okay? So that is action research for us. Then we have more quantitative kind of studies that will imply measuring. And remember that last class we talked about statistics and the impact that they may have if we only perform a survey with 2 students. That will be very different to have, I don't know, to carry out a survey with all the students in our university course, okay? So the representation of the people, of the informants, will be different. What is a survey? A survey involves a number of questions, okay, or a number of statements in which you ask these people to reply, okay? Your informants will reply, will answer that survey, and you will obtain significant information as long as the number of informants is representative. So you will be able to say that the majority of the students of the English course do this or that how they feel, and a survey could be connected to demographic information, to learning strategies, to motivation, to study conditions, okay, to prior experience. It would depend, okay? Then it says coding. Now, for example, one of the things that we did once was to carry out a survey in which we thought about a number of statements that described how the learners felt as regards learning English. So we try to code those statements and say what they represented. Okay? If the statement represented integrated motivation or instrumental motivation or attitude, and we assigned a category or a pattern to each of the statements. When we carry out qualitative studies, even when we interview people, the value of the data that we collect depends a lot on how we interpret it and the patterns that we find. Okay, so for that, we talk about coding. Coding could be a number, or coding could be a category that we assign. Okay. Systematic observation. It's a systematic observation. When you observed classes, you probably had some kind of grid or a number of questions or a number of things that you had to observe. Do you remember that? Yes? Which were the things, for example, that you had to observe?
Well, the students, the walls, if they have posters or not, the conditions of the classroom.
Okay. So you can see that observation appears in watching below and in measuring. The more systematic your observation is, the more measurable it is. Okay? So, for example, if you had a sort of table and in the table you had to tick and cross categories, and every time you observe the class, you had that grid, that could be comparable and measured. How many times did the teacher say this or that out of the 10 classes? So that could be measured. But probably what you did was to observe just by watching with a certain number of guiding questions, and you took notes. Not every class you took notes of the same thing. So probably you observed different things in every class. Or some things were, I don't know, repetitive. For example, the seating arrangement. If it was never changed, probably you never took notes of that. But if you had some kind of grid to tick, I don't know, how out of the 10 classes, how many classes was the seating arrangement modified? So only once. There you have more something of a systematic kind of observation. Do you understand the difference there? Which notes did you take when you observed classes? What did you write down? I'm interested in the students that are observing my classes too. No, when you observe classes from Didactica. So Didactica, you are asked, right? In Didactica, you are asked to observe classes, right? To observe a teacher over a period of time, and then to teach the same lesson, okay? Well, when you observe, you are asked to take notes, okay? And to keep a sort of diary of observations. That is this, okay? So you could, with your notes from Didactica, we could use the notes to analyze your observations. They could be a resource, okay, for any kind of study. Now, then here we also have other kinds of techniques that we can use, because what you have here are the different data collection procedures or techniques. Okay, what you have here on this square. Okay, we could design an experiment, a quasi-experiment. We could do action research. We could interview people. We could elicit, that is, ask for a learner to do a task, and we elicit information. In that case, we elicit production, learner production. We could carry out a survey, we could observe systematically or observe more openly and more relaxed, in a more relaxed way. We could devise a case study. What is a case study? It's a study of a particular case. A case could be an individual, a group of students, a group of two comparable students, an institution, okay? It could be only one student that we follow. It could be a group of two students. So there are cases. Jeannie was a case. Remember that we said emblematic cases? Jeannie and Victor were cases of study. When we have a case of study, the most important thing is to collect different types of information, okay? Not just one thing, because one thing would not be so relevant about the case. We understand that a case study has its limitations, of course, and we cannot draw really generalizable conclusions, but the conclusions that we draw could be expanded or could be related to similar cases. Then we have two words there, stories and diaries, that are quite easy to understand. They have to do with narratives of learners, for example. When you do your practicum, I asked you a couple of classes ago if you were asked to complete some kind of entry in a blog or some kind of reflection about your classes, and you said that yes. Is that the case?
Yes, Miss.
Okay, so that is a diary, okay? Not of a learner, but of a teacher. We could also have this kind of journal or diary applied to our learners. For example, for our learners to write some kind of reflection after every class, how they felt, if they felt that they learned something new, uh, and there we could obtain information about their metacognitive reflection, about the process of learning itself. Okay. The same happens with a protocol. A protocol is also called a think aloud protocol. I'm going to write it here. What is a think aloud protocol? It's a kind of technique that we use when we want to tap into a learner's metacognitive reflection and metalinguistic awareness. For instance, we ask a learner to do a task, and at the same time, we have a recording machine. It could be a phone or a recorder, and we ask them to think aloud as they perform the task. And to try, and that's why it's the less structured and the less controlled, because we cannot know what the learner will be able to actually think aloud. So we ask them to do the task and to try to think and speak as they perform the task. Okay. So, for example, some people that are really, really reflective and they think a lot and they know the rules will say something like, well, here I need to choose this option because we saw it in class, and I know that for this kind of structure, I need, I don't know, a bare infinitive. But others do not know what to say so much. So it is quite difficult to use this technique, okay? When the learners are open to speak, you get a lot of interesting information of their thinking process, what they do and what they think as they perform a task, okay? So, any questions so far? We've been talking about types of study in terms of the objectives, types of study in terms of the length of period in which we collect information, and the techniques that we could use that are more or less controlled, more or less structured to collect the data. Okay? I can only see One face, two faces here. What about the cameras of the rest? Or maybe my internet is not working well. Okay, good. There. Any questions
Sorry,
so far?
we have one.
No?
No, miss.
Okay. Did you know all this information?
Not all of them.
Not all of it. Okay. So let's go on. Another difference, and I will ask you here if you know, and if you've been talking about this, has to do with the type of data that we collect, whether it is, and the approach in methodology that we take, whether the type of study is more qualitative or quantitative. Okay? And we talked about this last class. What do you interpret from one or the other? Mhm. Okay. It's the first definition that you gave. Good. Correct. The second, I will explain why. Um, you said, for example, that when we carry out an interview, we obtain qualitative information. Good. Yes, because we have to read the answers, the responses to the questions that we ask, and we have to interpret that information and we have to code that information. Those are the steps. First, we read. The first thing we do is to observe what we obtained, okay, to read, and then to try to look for patterns. Okay, how many people said that they felt this way? Which were the different justifications they gave for their choice? Okay, so let's imagine. I'm just going to throw something quite random. Let's imagine that we ask all the students in the university course, in our university course, why they chose to study English. Okay? And we ask them to expand. So, what kind of answers do you think that we will obtain? Why did you choose to study English? Okay, so we're going to obtain those kinds of answers because I like it, because I like the language, because I like how it sounds, because I enjoy music in English, because I traveled and I want to use it, because I think it's significant, because a high number of answers, okay, all varied. We will have to classify them, to categorize those answers, okay, and to see how many people were motivated, for example, instrumentally. And within the instrumental motivation, we will see which were their utilitarian purposes. How many wanted to be part of? So we compare the theory that we have with the answers and we try to look for patterns and explanations. This is manual work, let's say. We have to read, sometimes you have to use colors, you have to categorize, you have to group in tables, you have to do a lot of things that have been simplified by the artificial intelligence. Lately, there are some resources that we could use to simplify not only artificial intelligence, but there are also softwares like Atlas T that helps you in looking and finding categories. But it's mainly the work of the researcher that also guides the artificial intelligence and guides the program and corrects and redirects and so on. But that very same study, once the responses have been categorized and coded, could be also a quantitative study. Why? Because we could say, out of the, I don't know, how many students are there in the university course? In your year 20, probably 40, 60, then we have 100, 600 students. Let's imagine that out of the 600 students, we obtain 400 responses. That's a considerable number, right? So when we classify the responses, we see how many and which percentage of students chose the university course because they had a teacher that marked their way, that inspired them. So we can see that in percentages. And that's when the study also becomes quantitative. We could only analyze that in terms of quantitative, especially when you create, for example, a survey instead of an open question. And in the survey, we already give the categories. So once they answered, you already have the results in numbers. You know, when you create a Google form and you have a question with a specific number of multiple choices, okay, and then they click there, and the results that you obtain are numbers, are percentages, okay. So what I proposed, for example, when you ask in an interview, you categorize and code the data, and then you look for the numbers, is a mixed study, a mixed methodology. You have the qualitative part and also the quantitative part, okay? Do you understand the difference there? Yes? Sure? Okay, stop me at any time. Let's go on. What are the characteristics of a qualitative study? Well, qualitative studies by the hard sciences have been criticized because they say that, of course, the researcher, we said that it demands a lot on the researcher, that the researcher is not fully objective, that we may modify the data to confirm or to obtain information as we wish. But it is really, really useful because it might describe a situation in detail. If we continue this survey with the students and we ask them to expand about their prior experience, we might obtain a lot of really interesting information and not just an adjective or one particular situation as a response. And it challenges a lot of premises. For example, one of the premises that it challenges is that by obtaining numerical information or representation, it's the only way in which we're going to obtain valuable data, okay? Here, what we do is to observe, to code, and to reach conclusions, okay? And we might learn a lot about the difficulties, the challenges, the experiences of language learners, okay? Now, as regards qualitative studies, the kind of instruments that we could use. Case studies are the most frequent. We study a group of students, we study a class, we study an institution. Narrative inquiries, these diaries or journals that students keep. For example, we may ask them to write over a period of 6 months about their experience in class, one entry in a diary every week. From that, we could derive theories, okay? There are also, that is grounded theory. I'm not going to go into detail because the idea today is for you to have an overview that needs a lot more information. We may carry out ethnographic studies. You know, ethnographic studies involve the researcher becoming a participant and an observer of a group. Imagine learning how they, a certain tribe in a certain part of the countryside lives. So you have to go there, be there with them, live with them. So an ethnographic study is what you do when you observe classes. You become an observer and sometimes a participant, okay? So you observe the class, and there could also be other instruments or other things that we might collect. Testimonials, narratives. A focus group is when you sit, I don't know, a group of people, or you create a meeting with a group of people, and you give them a picture, and you ask them to explain what that picture means to them. You ask a question, and all the data you collect in that instance is a focus group. You focus on a certain topic. Then you might collect documents, okay, or different kinds of instruments. Documents could be tests, materials, textbooks, the lesson plans, the plan of the year, okay? You could carry out interviews, open-ended or closed interviews, depending on the kind of question. The same with the survey. And a closed survey is when you just have to click and tick. And an open-ended survey has open questions, and the kind of response you get is open to what the informant wants to give. Okay, some will expand and will write a lot of information, and some will just say nothing else to add, and that's it. Okay, and logs and blogs and so on. Now, as regards action research, this is what I explained earlier. This involves reflective studies, okay, and it has to do, and it is used a lot in teaching, okay. So we have a test, a pre-test sometimes, a period of time in which we teach with trying to prove a new methodology. There it says it's an inquiry undertaken often by teachers in order to improve the effectiveness of their teaching. So they put to the test a new methodology. And then after a period of time, after applying that methodology, they test again. At the same time, they take notes of their methodology. At the same time, they observe, okay? That's what, in a way, you are doing with your practicum. Because you teach the same topic as the teacher suggests, but using your own materials, putting your own materials to the test, putting your own methodology and all your principles and ideas. You write a journal, you develop your own materials, and you see there how effective they are or not, okay? You observe the class before. During the period you are teaching the class, one of you is an observer, okay, of the other two, and you reflect about that. And at the end, you test your students and see how it worked. So, unknowingly, you are somehow doing action research, okay? Oh my God, now I noticed that, wait a sec. That I created the call with the account where I have a limit of time. So I'm going to send you another link, okay? To join. When this call finishes, join here, okay? So, let's go on. Then we talked about quantitative studies. This involves using numbers, okay? And for that, we need a larger number of informants for it to be significant, okay? And there we get, for example, scores, points, reaction times. That's the kind of experiment I told you when clicking. Yes, I understand the word. Okay. Or is this word English? And you have to react. Say yes or no, yes or no. Do you know the meaning of this word? Yes or no. Okay. That is a reaction time. And then, of course, the results are generalizations that we could say, well, this word is very frequent in the learners, or the mean, the median, and we need to learn some concepts about statistics, which I'm not going to teach unless we choose to carry out a quantitative study, okay? But the mean is the average, okay? So more or less for you to get to know, we work with percentages, with frequency of occurrence, with numbers in general. These are the statistical terms. We're not going to take time doing that. And we work with questionnaires with scores, okay? Remember that I told you the Likert scale. I totally agree, I am neutral about it, I disagree, and I totally disagree. So when you have a questionnaire with the score, number one is I totally agree. Number two, I agree. Number three, I'm neutral about it. Number four, I disagree. Number five, I totally disagree. So every time the learner clicks a number, that number implies a category. So then you can say, with the scores, you get the percentages, okay? And finally, when you observe the results, you may say, well, 20% of the students, 20% of the students totally disagrees with this statement, okay? So you link variables, numbers, and informals. And frequency of occurrence, tests, for example, if you see the scores in tests, I have 20 students, the majority or the minority passed the test. It's as simple as that, okay? In numbers, how many got a 10? How many got a 9? Imagine if you study that in the first year, okay? In language 1. In language 1, you have a large number of students. So there, it is significant to observe tests and numbers there, okay? To see, for example, after the first test, how many students passed the subject? How many students started the subject and how many students finished the subject? What information does it tell me about the subject? Okay, if I have 400 students. So there, the numbers are really significant to understand a lot of things. Now, I told you that we could mix, and this is very frequent in SLA. So we combine qualitative information with quantitative information, and we do something to attain reliability and validity of the findings, which are two very important concepts. That is, for example, triangulation. Triangulation implies using, I already told you this in other words, using a number of different information gathering techniques. This is crucial in case studies. I can not only elicit the learners a production out of a task. I also need to interview them. I also need to carry out a survey. I also need to talk to the teachers. I also need to observe the materials, the lesson plan. And like that, I obtain the same information from different sources, and that gives my study more reliability and validity, especially to the conclusions I reach. Okay? Something important here is that we have already talked about this. This is what we need to do when we plan research. The first thing is for us to question ourselves, okay? And to think about the things we are interested in. Because, and this is not only for our project that would take us a month or two, but this is for research in general. It should be something that we like, that we are in love with, that we are particularly motivated to do because we spend a lot of time doing that. So we need to choose a project. When we choose a project, we define, for example, research questions. What are the things that we're going to ask ourselves? We may have hypotheses. What is a hypothesis? Do you know?
Yes, like an idea or a
According to
preconception,
the
an assumption that you have prior to carrying out a study.
Okay, an assumption.
Mhm.
What assumptions do we have about why English students at our university course choose English? What do you think? What could be a possible hypothesis? We may have one or more.
Maybe because they were good at English at school.
Okay, so we could say that the majority of the students that choose English as a university course were good at English, or they liked the subject at school. They had a prior experience that was positive. Okay, that is a good hypothesis. But then we need to collect data to see if we confirm it or not. Okay, and that's what happens with hypotheses. We collect data and we confirm them or we reject them. We or refute them. We partly confirm them or not. Okay, so we do not have to alter the data to confirm our hypothesis. We collect data to see if we can confirm the hypothesis or not. And that is the value of our study. Okay. Then we have to think of key notions that will guide the analysis. The question that I proposed as an imaginary situation today has a lot to do with motivation, because deep there we could see that in the question, why did you choose to study English? We are not asking what was your motivation, but we are asking what your motivations were, right? So we need to define the concept of motivation, how we understand it, which other concepts get into play there. And then we need to analyze the data that we collect. We might need to work with the data a little bit. If it's numbers, to get the tables and the charts and the statistics. If it's qualitative data, the categories and the coding. And there we analyze the results that we obtain. We discuss with the theory. So we interpret the results based on the theory and based on prior studies. And finally, we write a report. In the case of our project, you will have a short report. Some students write as much as 20 pages in total. Some expand a lot and write up to 40 with the appendices and everything. But a dissertation, una tesis, una tesina, is minimum 60 pages, maximum, there is no maximum, but many write 100, okay? So that is the report of what you did, okay? That is a kind of una tesis, una tesina, a report. It's a linguistic essay, okay, in this case, that follows a particular structure, a typical structure. It usually has an introduction. It may have, it will have a theoretical framework. If it's an tesina, it will have a state of the art or antecedents of your study, that is other people that studied the same topic. It will have a methodology where you explain all the steps that you took, the informants. It will have a results section where you show the results of your data collection procedures. An analysis section, these two sections could be together or not. That analysis section may also be called discussion. It will also have a conclusion. And finally, you will have references and possibly appendices. The references in our case will come from all the material that you have in your booklet, and that's the point of having the material there. And from your syllabus, where you have all the references of everything, all the concepts I give you in the subject. Then your appendices may be, for example, the tasks that you ask your students to perform, the data that you collected, the tables or charts that you used to analyze the data. It may be the transcriptions if we interview students orally, okay? So all of that goes in the appendix. And it is, of course, academic kind of writing that involves using academic language, formal language, no contractions, trying to write in an organized way, developing your paragraphs, okay? A lot of other tips I will give you as we progress. So this is what I explained. So we organize a report into sections. These are the typical or prototypical sections in a report: introduction, theoretical framework, methodology, results and discussion, conclusion, references, and appendixes. We include a cover sheet. We include proper referencing. We never say that a concept was our definition if it was defined by someone else. So we learn some ways of quoting or citing authors inside the text, that is called in-text citation. And all the authors that we include inside the text should also appear in the list of references at the end, because that involves, as I wrote here, intellectual honesty. So, and we know that plagiarism is a crime. It is a legal crime. And we know that we need to assign and acknowledge the authors that developed the concepts that we work with. And then we understand writing as a process where what you produce is a draft. Then when you edit, you work together writing the draft, you proofread, you present your draft. That is probably your second or third draft as a group. Then you get some feedback, and we understand the process of as writing and rewriting and improving and improved versions of our own work, because that's how academic writing works. If we have the call is about to finish, so have the link open. If we have that, then we understand how the process works, okay? Academic writing in general. We see each other in the other talk, okay? In the other call. I'm going to admit the rest. I'll take advantage of this time to take attendance. Okay, so Rocio was here.
Yes, Miss, I'm here.
Valetka, Irina.
Here.
Leandro here. Ajelen, absent today. Belen Chico was here. Maria
Yes,
Belen
Miss, I'm here.
Maria Belen Darwich here. She was here at some point. Carolina Díaz. here. Samuel? No? Okay. Belén Figueroa here. Sofia Fuentes here. Diego Licantica was here at some point. Irina Melian here. Sofia Nin? Not here. María Luz Parada here.
Here, Miss.
Okay. Rodríguez Alejandra. Catalina.
Here, Miss.
You told me about Catalina. Adrián here. Irina Salinas here. Julieta Terán here. Margarita here. Julieta Díaz Piorno here too.
Here, Miss.
Okay. So absent today, Catalina that could not join. Mariano, right? Sofía Nin, Samuel Fernandez, Carolina, and Angelem. Okay? Now, let's continue. So we were talking about the last part of our project, okay? That is writing a report. And that is understanding that we need to think of writing as process. When researchers write a tesina or tesis de grado or de posgrado, or when they write articles for publication, it is a process of writing, revising, submitting, getting feedback, improving, changing. Sometimes we need to change things that we didn't expect to change. We need to change organization, order of information. We need to change the perspective, the tone. So we need to understand that even a report involves at least one revision or two, okay? So that is why, not because it is wrong, but that is why I typically ask you to submit an improved version at the end of the process, okay? That is when you are about to sit for the final exam. Any questions so far? After class? Isn't it something that you could join, you could share with the rest, that could be useful to the rest? Okay, 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 good. Anybody else? Any questions about the project? Well, I'm going to show you something that I typically do for the project, and that is something that we will work upon together, okay? Every year when we decide a topic for the project, I do this. This is from last year. So we choose a title, we decide what type of study it's going to be, we decide on the aim, that is the purpose of the project, and then we identify specific objectives that will sometimes be the steps we need to take. You see that the aims and the objectives are generally expressed in terms of two infinitive verbs, okay? We talk about the methodology, the instruments we're going to use. We talk about other types of methodology. For example, if we are going to ask for tasks, we describe the informants. Once we choose the informants, we talk about the organization, what we're going to do in the different phases of the project, the questions that will guide our analysis, the topics that we'll discuss, if we have a hypothesis, what that hypothesis is. So this is something like guidelines for the project, and I'm going to do the same with you, okay? I will create the link and I will ask you to participate there so that we create these guidelines together, okay? I was thinking about the possibilities that you suggested, but I need some more time to work on them and actually think of a title and a purpose of the project and give you suggestions. But since this is our last class in September and we're not going to see each other, we will be in touch, okay? And I will send you the link so that we, as you can, we could work on that. And when we see each other again, we have a definite idea of the project, okay? Do you agree? Yes?
Yes, Miss.
Okay, so that as regards the project. And if you don't have any more questions or suggestions, we are going to start working with learning strategies. Give me a second. Just 1 second. Okay, so I told you that we were going to work with learning strategies. Learning strategies is a topic that if we read Selinker's definition of interlanguage, started to be thought of at that time in the 1970s. Actually, remember that within the 5 processes that Selinker mentioned that language learners apply to the process of acquiring a second language, he talked about learning strategies and communication strategies. But in his text, in his seminal article and paper, he said that not much had been studied and not much could be said about learning strategies. This was in the 1970s. Then, of course, what he wrote there lit a sort of spark for other researchers to start studying learning strategies. And there are different researchers that carried out research in this area. One of them was O'Malley, were pair O'Malley and Chamot. There was also Rubin, but there is a famous researcher that is called Rebecca Oxford that up until now is the it's a researcher that has studied learning strategies in more detail and that had created a sort of a taxonomy or categorization of learning strategies that is the most comprehensive nowadays. Actually, when I was a student at university, I think it was 2008, Papi was here in Tucumán. And that year, Rebecca Oxford came to Tucumán. So, this year we will not have such grand figures, but we will have national important figures in FAPI. So that year, I remember that I heard her talk, and that caught my attention a lot, and was one of the things that, has been a topic that is my passion since then, somehow. So, what is the role that learning strategies have in L2 development? And that is the importance of this topic. I'm going to skip some parts of this class, but I'm going to show you there what the key objective of there. This is to give you some kind of framework, okay, where we are and what we have done so far. We started the subject by introducing the goals of SLA. Remember the 3 questions. We analyzed the definition of interlanguage. How can we define interlanguage? Do you remember a definition of interlanguage? It's a third system, and we can also define it as the individual learner development of an L2. We could also define it as transitional knowledge, okay? We have different short definitions and longer definitions. Transitional knowledge of an L2 that the learner has at a certain period of time. Why transitional? Because it changes. And we studied interlanguage and its characteristics, its main features, and one of them is heterogeneity. What was heterogeneity? No? What does it mean when we say that interlanguage knowledge is heterogeneous?
That it's not the same for everyone.
That it's not the same for everyone, that is that it's variable.
Oh.
Remember?
It means that it's composed of several types of knowledge.
Okay, so that in order for us to know a language, we need to know several different things. It's composed of different types of knowledge. And there we talked about knowledge and ability. We talked about procedural and declarative knowledge. We talked about the different competencies as proposed by Tyrone, okay? And that's where I'm heading. We have that heterogeneity involves different types of knowledge, and that by knowing different things, we develop communicative competence. Which were the different types of knowledge that were considered within the notion of communicative competence by Himes? Possibility, appropriateness, feasibility, and attestedness. Possibility involves that something is possible in the language, it's grammatically possible. Appropriateness has to do with the context of situation. Feasibility, that it is feasible that we can process it, and attestedness, that has been used, that we could observe it in the usage of native speakers of the language, right? Now, apart from this, we also saw how Tyrone, and this is her interpretation of other two authors that are called Canal and Swain, understood communicative competence as composed and this heterogeneous type of knowledge as composed of grammatical competence, that is knowledge of the rules of the language, social linguistic knowledge, how we adapt that knowledge to specific interlocutors, okay, strategic competence or strategic knowledge, and discourse competence, that is how we know how to build texts, our knowledge of different genres and text types, and our knowledge of how to speak and write in more than sentences or utterances, but in longer pieces of discourse. Here we're going to concentrate on strategic competence because we are talking about learning strategies, okay? It's not only learning and communication strategies. So the word strategy is not a word that belongs to the field of SLA. It's a word that we use in life, right? And we use it in Spanish. We say estrategia too. So what is a strategy? How can we define strategies? Huh? No idea of a strategy? ¿Alguna vez han jugado el té? What is a strategy?
Miss, could it be that it is like a kind of a plan that you think in order to do something else, but it is um, like a design, for example, or in your mind.
Okay, so
That
you use two words, a design in your
uh-huh.
mind and a plan.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a design or a plan to do something else, okay? To achieve something else.
Yes.
Anybody else that could define learning strategies? Or a strategy, sorry, just strategy.
Maybe like a technique
A
that you
technique.
came up with in order to solve a problem.
Okay, a technique to solve a problem. All right. Technique, plan, design, to do something else to solve a problem. Okay, well, with that, I could start, and I'm going to give you first the dictionary definition. Okay, a detailed plan for achieving success in situations such as war, politics, business, industry, or sport, or the skill of planning for such situations. And another definition here is a way of doing something or dealing with something. So both of your definitions were adequate to the notion of strategy. Now, here we're going to adapt to strategies for learning. Okay, so we're going to see what these authors, Rubin and Oxford, proposed as definitions. Okay, and there you can see that there are the words that you mentioned too. The techniques or devices which a learner may use to acquire knowledge. You said to do something else, Maria Belén. And Irina, you said to solve a problem. What's the problem learners have? Learn. They need to solve the problem of learning. And in our case, they need to solve the problem of learning a language. Okay? So they need to acquire knowledge. And this is Oxford's definition, tools for active, self directed involvement, which is essential for developing communicative competence. So here we have that we do not only need knowledge, we need communicative competence, okay, in order to be successful language users. We saw that when we saw heterogeneity, remember? We saw that we need knowledge and ability, and we need to develop communicative competence. So we have techniques, devices, plan, tools. All of those words could be the noun that defines a strategy. But a strategy is a technique, a device, a tool, or a plan to do something else. And what is that something else that we need to do? Learn a language or acquire knowledge of a language. But that knowledge needs to become communicative competence. Okay? Something that Oxford proposes is what I like the most about this idea of learning strategies, that learners become active, that learners are autonomous, that learners are active in their learning process, that they are able to involve themselves in the learning process and self-directed towards success. Okay, so we can learn to do things that will help us develop our knowledge. Okay, and that is the objective of learning, of all kind of learning, right? So this is what I told you in a way that at the beginning we defined with Selinker, we defined learning strategies. There were some descriptive studies and taxonomies. Later on in the 1980s, there were sporadic studies. There was a learning strategy instruction, so they started teaching learning strategies. And from the 2000 onwards, there was renewed interest in learning strategies. So it is a concept or an idea that in which we are interested nowadays as teachers and researchers. Okay. Now I'm going to develop this topic, okay, which is in this chapter. Okay, this is the chapter that you have in your booklets, or if you don't have it in your booklet, which I reduced, you have it in the campus for certain. Okay, This is the taxonomy that Oxford proposed. As you can see, it's huge, the blue one, okay, compared to the one proposed by O'Malley and Chamot and the one proposed by Rubin. I'm going to develop the one by Oxford, okay? That is a comparison for you to see the difference in detail, okay? Oxford talked about two groups of strategies, direct and indirect strategies. And she said that direct strategies were the ones directly connected to language learning, and indirect strategies were strategies that could be applied to other areas, okay, of life, but that were also important in the process of learning a language. Within direct strategies, we have memory strategies, cognitive strategies, and compensation strategies. And within indirect strategies, we have metacognitive strategies, affective, and social strategies. Okay? Now, let's talk about memory strategies. And because Rebecca Oxford was very smart, is very smart, she's still alive, she thought of an acronym or a mnemonic technique to remember the categories within each of these groups of strategies. As you can see from the name, a memory strategy is a strategy to memorize, okay, to retain in memory concepts and ideas. And she used this acronym for that, CARE. So which are the things that we can do to retain new words? We can create mental linkages, that is placing a word in the center, like a mind map, placing a word in the center and remember family of words, family of concepts. We can apply images and sounds. We have been talking about this a lot with kids. So using flashcards or sounds to retain the meanings of words. Reviewing well. When we studied for an exam, she talked about structured reviewing. She described the process of memorization or retaining concepts and ideas that are complex in memory as something that is the result of structured reviewing. That means revising, then giving it some time to sink in a way, then revising again, and not trying to collapse our memory the night before an exam. If we do that, if we structure the way in which we study and we allow our brain to rest, we are more likely to be successful in the long run. And employing action, that is moving, sometimes using mechanical techniques. Writing by hand is a good way of retaining in memory. We said that in class 2. And physical response. Sometimes some people, in order to memorize things, they need to move, they need to walk, they need to go for a run, they need to be in movement as they try to revise. That was my technique when I was I think a teenager. I remember that I went for a walk revising, but it's individual. The thing with all the strategies that I'm going to be to mention today is not that they are applicable to everyone. Is that people will choose the ones that are best for each other, okay, and for each student, and they are going to apply the ones that are actually helpful for them, okay? So the important point here is that everyone needs some kind of plan or strategy to learn, okay? It might not be the same, but at least a plan. Then the second group is cognitive strategies. Cognitive strategies has to do with cognition, of course, and the acronym that she devised here was PRAC. Practicing, remember that this word appeared a lot in the subject because it's the one that allows us to make our declarative knowledge or explicit knowledge and transform it, create that shift into ability, into procedural knowledge. So repeating, of course, is a form of practicing. How else are we going to learn irregular verbs if not by repeating? We need drilling, but not for everything. We might need formally practicing with sounds and writing systems, for example, writing sentences, creating texts, recognizing and using some formulas, okay? Recombining new words into new texts and new situations or contexts, and practicing naturalistically. That means using language in communicative situations. Receiving and sending messages, that is, using language in communicative situations. Analyzing and reasoning, and this has a lot to do with metacognitive reflection and metalinguistic awareness. Why do I need this structure and not another one? What is supposed to be the rule here? And analyzing that. Creating structure for input and output. When we read a text and we want to study it, we might create our own notes. I don't know if you do that for your exams. You give all the content some kind of structure. And when we prepare a talk and a class, we also create that structure for the output. First, I'm going to say this. Next, I'm going to say that. Here, I'm going to show a video. That is the structure you create for your presentations. You take notes, you summarize, you create a mind map, you create your notes by highlighting, by underlining, okay? So these are all cognitive strategies. So am I explaining or saying things that are very distant from your reality? I'm giving structure to what you already do, okay? So to what every learner already does. And finally, compensation strategies. These are what Tyrone mentioned as communication strategies too. Why compensation strategies? Because we compensate for the gaps in our knowledge. There are obstacles that we find when communicating, and we need to compensate for them. What are these strategies? Well, the acronym here is GO. In terms of receptive skills, reading and listening, guessing intelligently. That is, using linguistic and contextual clues or cues to guess the meaning of words, to guess the structure, to interpret. When you do discourse analysis, for example, when you read a text, you look at the structure and you say, well, this is a letter to the editor because it says to the editor. So that is guessing. So what kind of structure am I expecting here? Well, I'm going to find an argumentative text. Yeah, right. Okay. So where is the claim? Where is the thesis? Which are the arguments? Well, I have a picture here, so it might be the author. Those are things of guessing intelligently. Overcoming limitations are all the communication strategies that we apply when we do not know a word or a phrase, or we lack the structures and the resources to communicate our ideas, but we want to keep communicating. Switching to the mother tongue. So that is something we might observe in learners, especially in a lower level. Getting help. How can I say this? Or what's the English for? Or what's the meaning of? Those are strategies, communication strategies. Using mime and gesture to explain, well, the little thingy that you used to, and there you're using mime and gesture. Avoiding communication is also a communication strategy, but it's not a very successful one. But it might be the case that learners avoid communicating because they feel they lack the resources. This could be partial when, for instance, you ask a learner, and this is what I remember from a test. We have been working with routines and descriptions and integrating the content. So I devised a task and I asked them to describe themselves and integrate everything. So the learner wrote a text that he or she had been practicing about themselves. Then the following test, we had been working with descriptions of another person. What did the learner do? Write a description of him or herself again. So was that avoidance? Yes, partially, not totally. So the learner wanted to do the task, but felt that lacked the resources to describe someone else, so chose to do and select the topic, not Was not something against me. It was a strategy. Okay, it's a strategy. Then selecting the topic is a strategy. Adjusting or approximating the message involves looking for a synonym or looking for a paraphrase. Sometimes we coin words when we don't know the words. And we use circumlocutions, that is, to beat about the bushes, to explain what we mean. What I was doing when, for example, I don't know how to say something, the lid, the thing that you use to cover the bottle. So it's like this and it has this size, okay? Where can I find it? Well, there I never said the word lid, but I explained what it meant, and that is a circumlocution, okay? Now, up to this point, can we teach strategies? Do we have to teach strategies? What do you think?
Probably yes. There are a lot of tricks that we have learned throughout our learning process, and that maybe we can teach others.
Of
I
course.
think that's why it is considered like a benefit to be a speaker of English as a second language and be a teacher over the idea of the native language teacher.
Exactly. I totally agree. So we need to be aware of the different strategies and teach them. Okay, so it's completely valid to tell your learners and your students and teach them how to study your subject. Okay, so if they need to remember words and they're going to be tested in vocabulary, shouldn't we tell them what they could do in order to revise the subject? Yes. Make a list of the words, use different colors, try and create your flashcards. We also create flashcards and lists of words and quizzes and games so that they can see the words in different contexts and memorize them. So also tell them to do the same, to create their own quizzes, to I don't know, create pictures and words. Now it's so easy. We can create a quiz online. You can practice online. You can create with different apps. Okay. So act the word, use it in Pictionary, in charades. So there you create different types of mental linkages and connections. And if it's a content subject, well, you also tell them how to revise, how to create structure for the content. Okay, how to plan the writing. So it's something we need to include. This is also something we need to include, and we include it when we say guessing intelligently. Everything you do in pre-teaching of reading and listening is applying learning strategies. Guessing intelligently. Look at the pictures. What do you think the context of situation is? Okay? You're using contextual clues there. Look at the words. Read the text once. Look at the familiar words. How many familiar words can you find? How many transparent words can you find? How many cognates can you find? Okay, what do you think the text is going to be about? Or read the first sentence of each paragraph. Anticipate, predict. That is guessing intelligently, and that facilitates listening and reading. The same for communication. You play games. You give them this classroom language at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the unit, so that they can ask for help. You allow for miming. You mime to explain the meaning of a word. Okay, you use your body language and your gestures. And switching to the mother tongue is not a crime sometimes. Okay, so you sometimes need to use the mother tongue if it's going to facilitate learning. Of course, after applying many other strategies. Now, let's see the indirect strategies. The first group is the metacognitive strategies, and the acronym here is CAPE. What is CAPE here? Centering your learning. That is focusing, paying attention. If you're studying for a test, centering your learning involves, okay, what's the syllabus of the subject? How many units do I need to have? Okay, what are the contents? Where do I find the materials for the subject? How many weeks am I going to need in order to study this subject? Okay, You delay speech production to focus on listening. So today you're focusing on listening a lot. You're learning, taking notes, and probably your interventions or how you participate will be later, or once I open discussion, or when you feel ready to participate. Arranging and planning your learning, when you decide which subject to sit for first, when you organize your timetable, when you set your objectives. Well, this year I'm going to do this subject, but I'm going to delay another subject for the following year. That is a metacognitive strategy. And evaluating your learning. Self-monitoring when you speak and when you write, and also self-evaluating, testing yourself. Well, how well did I do this term? What do I need to change for the next one? What do I need to do? Okay, so that is metacognitive strategies. Then affective strategies, they have a lot to do with the affective factors we mentioned, and some of the strategies that she includes here have to do with reducing the level of anxiety, for example, lowering your anxiety, using progressive relaxation, breathing techniques, okay, meditation, using music, using laughter, laughing with your students, okay, laughing at your mistakes, laughing at things, including jokes, encouraging yourself, like encouraging them and telling them to see their progress and encourage themselves when they cannot see the progress. Okay, taking risks but wisely, taking all the risks during the course of studies, but not taking the risks in the final exam. So telling them when to risk to, and of course taking your emotional temperature. That is sometimes analyzing what you're doing, discussing feelings, how they feel about the topic, how they feel about the project, talking to other students, creating groups of students, okay, listening to themselves when they cannot do anything else, or maybe, for example, now that is a stressful time for you, usually with the practicum, what can you do? How can you support each other, okay? And finally, the last set is social strategies that, according to Oxford, the acronym is ACE. Asking questions and empathizing with others. Asking questions, asking for clarification, for verification, for correction, when you ask for feedback, okay? Cooperating with others. That was a C, sorry, that should be highlighted too in bold. Cooperating with others, that is with your peers, with more proficient language users, going to office hours, asking your teacher, asking other students that have already taken the subject, for example, and empathizing with others, understanding your own feelings and thoughts and the feelings and thoughts of others, okay? So these are all the strategies that Oxford suggested, okay? Direct strategies, memory, cognitive, and compensation strategies. Indirect strategies, metacognitive, affective, and social, okay? There, for example, here you have a sort of quiz or test to see if we can identify some of the strategies. This could be statements included in a survey. I tend to organize my time and plan what to study each day before a final exam. That is an example of what kind of strategy? I tend to organize my time and plan what to study each day before a final exam.
It's a direct strategy because
Uh-huh.
it's related with learning,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't remember the name, the exact name.
Okay. Nobody? Okay, we'll leave it there. Before handing in a writing task, I check carefully any mistakes I might have made, or edit, and choose better words or structures to convey the intended meaning. What does it sound like? Well, see there that this is not coded. This is what I would give an informant, okay, as a sort of survey, and they say if they agree or disagree with the statement, okay? And once they agree or disagree with the statement, I know what kind of strategy is behind because I can code it, okay? I am a visual kind of learner, so it's always better for me if I match concepts with images or colors. Faced with many subjects and activities, I usually decide what is best to do first, depending on my needs and preferences. Before an oral presentation, I usually rehearse aloud several times, sometimes taking breaks between repetitions. And I'm going to show you my interpretation of these statements. So I tend to organize my time is a metacognitive strategy that has to do with arranging and planning your learning. Before handing in, I check and edit. That is self-monitoring, which is also a metacognitive strategy. For example, when you ask your learners to do a test, then before they hand in, you ask them, have you checked? Have you revised? You are teaching them a metacognitive strategy. You are teaching them that when finishing the test, they need to take their time to self-monitor their production because they might find mistakes or blanks or things they forgot to do. So you are teaching them a metacognitive strategy, okay? When you take time to discuss the test after you got the results, it's also teaching a metacognitive strategy, going over your mistakes, revising, asking questions. Also a social strategy, because asking and discussing with peers or with more proficient learners is something that will help their learning process, understanding their mistakes. I am a visual kind of learner. This is a memory strategy using imagery. Faced with many subjects and activities, I decide what is best to do first. This is metacognitive. Again, arranging and planning your learning, sometimes self-evaluating the process. And before an oral presentation, I usually rehearse aloud several times. This is memory, reviewing well, but it could also be cognitive, practicing, okay, or structure reviewing. Now, I think we had another activity. Yes. We have already discussed this. Why teach learning strategies and how to teach learning strategies. Why? To help learners become better learners, to empower them to take control over their own learning, to help them overcome obstacles in communication, to foster metacognitive and metalinguistic awareness and reflection, and sometimes to create a sense of learner community or learning community because they can support each other with the social strategies, okay? And how? Well, we also do the same as with any other topic that we teach, okay? We prepare, we present the strategy, we practice the strategy, and we evaluate the strategy. And we also explicitly tell them that we're going to teach strategies to help them improve reading, improve listening. We scaffold the strategy, we support them, we guide them what to do first and what to do next. But we know that we are going to give them strategies that are not for everyone, okay? For example, if you are faced with a certain group of students from a particular culture that do not prefer to talk to others so much, probably they're going to apply more metacognitive or cognitive strategies, social strategies. Okay, and this is related to individual learner differences, different learning and cognitive styles. Okay, so we have many tools that we could apply that we need to teach, but we need to know that each learner will choose the strategies that are most suitable for them. Okay, so any questions before we finish? I'm going to leave the presentation anyway, and you have the material, and I suggest that you read Oxford directly, because she explains and gives a lot of examples and is very reader friendly. It's not tiresome in any way. So, open to questions. Were you aware of learning strategies at any point? No?
Yes, Miss. For example, in books, in the students' books, you have a little box, for example, with tips or
Right.
for listening or reading comprehension exercises.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, I remember now in Metro, the line that I sometimes use, it says successful or active speakers, active listeners, active readers do this or that. And they have that word, active speakers do this, active listeners do that. And you see there that Oxford mentioned that learning strategies are for learners to become active in the process of learning. Okay? So maybe you were not knowing that much, but everything we do somehow leads to learning strategies. You did not have that present, but many of the things we do are aimed at developing these learning strategies that make of us autonomous, self-directed learners. Okay, and that's what we want our students to be able to continue learning without us, without our help. Mhm. Okay, well, that's all for today. I know that you're tired, and we are going to see each other in 2 weeks, but we'll be in contact because of the project. Okay, so um, this class dismissed. I'm going to stay with you, Leandro, for your question, and see you in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks, actually.